He pulled up in the middle of the night. Headlights shining. Engine running. A woman was being dragged. Screaming. Fighting. Her bare feet scraped the sidewalk. Peter Gold saw it. He slammed his brakes. He stepped out. He was a 25-year-old medical student, just walking back to his car after a night with friends. And suddenly, he was face to face with evil. The man had a gun. Peter raised his hands. "I don't want trouble." Bang! One shot. Right into Peter's stomach. He dropped. The man pointed again. Click! Click! The gun jammed. He aimed at Peter's head. Click! Click! Still jammed. The woman was screaming. Peter was bleeding. And the shooter? He grabbed the woman again. You're watching an Unbelievable True Story, where we only tell real stories. Not to scare you, but to prepare you. New Orleans, Louisiana. November 20th, 2015. 3 a.m. in the Warehouse District. It was cold. Quiet. Mostly empty streets. Peter had been out with friends. He was just walking back to his car. That's when he saw it. A man dragging a young woman across the sidewalk. She was crying. Barefoot. Her hands were tied behind her. People always say, "I wouldn't get involved." But Peter? He didn't look away. Peter Gold was 25. A fourth-year med student at Tulane University. Bright. Calm. Kind. He wanted to become a doctor. Wanted to help people. Save lives. He had just finished studying late that night. Laughed with friends over burgers and fries. Sent a goodnight text to his mom. He wasn't reckless. He wasn't looking for danger. He just didn't want a woman to be kidnapped while he did nothing. The woman, aged 25 too, had been waiting outside a bar. She had left her friends. Walked ahead. That's when she was grabbed. The attacker shoved her into his car and drove off. But she fought. At a red light, she jumped out and ran. He chased her down the sidewalk, tackled her, and dragged her back. And that's when Peter drove by. Peter pulled over. Jumped out. Shouted, "Hey! Let her go!" The man turned, gun in hand. Peter froze. "Look, I just..." Bang! The bullet tore into his abdomen. Peter collapsed on the pavement. The man walked over. Pointed the gun at Peter's face. Pulled the trigger. Click! Again. Click! The gun jammed. Again and again, he tried to shoot Peter in the head. Nothing. Then he turned back to the woman. She screamed. And he drove off. Most people freeze in crisis. It's not because they're weak. It's because they've never been trained. According to the CDC, 1 in 4 men are victims of physical violence in their lifetime, CDC, 2022. Peter wasn't trained for combat. But he was trained for compassion. And that saved lives. A bystander called 911. Police and paramedics arrived. Peter was rushed to the hospital. He lost a lot of blood. Internal bleeding. Torn organs. But he survived. The woman? Safe. Thanks to Peter. Cameras captured the whole thing. The attack. The shooting. The suspect's face. His car. Police released the video. The city was outraged. Who shoots a man for helping someone? The community wanted justice. His name was Ulrich Kane, aged 21. He had a record. Days before, he had robbed someone else at gunpoint. He was out on bond. That morning, after shooting Peter, he ran. Police found him 3 days later. He was hiding out with friends. They surrounded the house. Guns drawn. Cain surrendered. Peter was in surgery for hours. Doctors worked fast. He had saved lives before, and now it was their turn to save his. Peter's parents flew in. His classmates prayed. The city watched. And Peter? He fought through it all. This is a real story. Every fact you hear is public. You can check it yourself. If real-life mysteries leave you breathless, subscribe now to Unbelievable True Story. Because the next truth we uncover might hit even closer to home. There's also a course for men in the description and pinned comment. Built by real combat trainers, it teaches how to stop threats fast, protect your space, and fight with purpose. You don't need experience, just the will to survive. Now stay with me, because we're about to break down how Peter's courage shook a whole city, what the shooter told police, and what Peter's doing today. They said Peter should have minded his business, that he could have stayed in his car, drove away, called 911 from a safe place. But he didn't. He stepped out, looked the danger in the face, and nearly died for it. When the video went public, New Orleans froze. You could see everything. The dragging, the yelling, the gunshot, Peter falling, and most haunting of all, the gunman pulling the trigger again and again, while the gun jammed over Peter's body. People cried watching it. Old folks, students, neighbors. One woman said, "He saved her. And God saved him." Uric Cain was caught after a 3-day manhunt. He was hiding at a friend's apartment. SWAT stormed in. No shots fired. He gave up. When they cuffed him, someone yelled from down the block, "Coward!" Cain had been in and out of trouble. He had robbed a couple just days before shooting Peter. Held them at gunpoint. Stole their car. He was out on bail. Had a rap sheet before age 20. His own lawyer would later say he was raised in trauma. But what he did was evil. Peter was still in the ICU. He had been shot in the stomach, the bullet tore through his intestines. He went through multiple surgeries. Doctors worked around the clock. His mom never left his side. At one point, they said if the bullet had moved an inch, he'd be gone. The woman never showed her face publicly. But she told police, "He saved my life. I was gone. He brought me back." She had injuries, cuts, and bruises, but she walked away alive. Because Peter stepped in. Tulane held a candlelight vigil. People brought signs that said, "You are a hero, Peter." Real men step up. Thank you for not looking away. Local news ran back-to-back updates. Even the mayor spoke out. Peter's courage is what we hope to see in our city. We owe him our support, our thanks, and our protection. His college roommate said, "He's always been like that. He helps. He never watches someone suffer." Another classmate added, "He's the guy you want in the room during a crisis. Calm, sharp, kind." Everyone agreed, Peter didn't just act brave. He was brave. The district attorney announced multiple charges. Attempted first-degree murder. Second-degree kidnapping. Armed robbery. Illegal possession of a firearm. Bail was denied. Cain would later plead guilty to attempted murder and kidnapping. After 2 weeks, Peter opened his eyes. His first words were to his mom. He asked if the woman was safe. She said yes. Peter cried. So did she. He spent over a month in the hospital. Lost weight. Needed help walking. Physical therapy started slow. He had to relearn basic things, even sitting up hurt. But Peter kept trying. Every single day. His doctors said he shouldn't even be alive. 1 month after the shooting, Peter was given the Medal of Courage by Tulane University. Students stood and clapped for 10 full minutes. When Peter rolled out in a wheelchair, the whole room went silent. Then they stood again. He didn't say much. He just smiled and nodded. Peter didn't want to be called a victim. He told friends, "I made a choice. I just didn't want to watch a woman get hurt." He didn't talk about the pain. He didn't complain about the surgeries. He focused on getting better. Most people freeze when something horrible happens. Not because they're bad, but because their brain locks up from shock. Training helps. Practice helps. And just knowing what to do can be the difference between life and death. That's why we added a real self-defense course made by law enforcement and martial artists. It's in the description and pinned comment. 1 hour that might save your life. That question haunted everyone. What if the gun hadn't jammed? What if Peter had been shot in the head? What if both of them died? The answer? We don't know. But we do know this. Peter stood up anyway, even knowing he could die. Uric Kane was sentenced to 54 years in prison. The judge didn't sugarcoat it. You nearly ended a man's life for trying to help a stranger. You stole peace from this city. Kane said nothing. No apology. No explanation. Just silence. Peter eventually returned to med school. Graduated a year later than planned. He became a doctor. He saved lives again, this time in hospitals. But every year on November 20th, he lights a candle. One for the woman. And one for the moment that changed everything. Have you heard this story before? What would you have done in that moment? If you're drawn to real stories that stay with you, subscribe now to an Unbelievable True Story. Because every week, we reveal the darkest truths hidden in plain sight. Before he was shot, before the headlines, Peter Gold was just Peter. He was 25. A medical student. Living in New Orleans. He loved jazz, wore glasses, ran every morning, and dreamed of helping people in crisis. He had one younger sister. He called his mom every Sunday. He wasn't rich. Wasn't flashy. He just wanted to make things better. Peter had just dropped off a friend from a night out. He wasn't drunk. He wasn't tired. Just driving home. Heading down Magazine Street, one of those calm, quiet areas of New Orleans. Not the kind of place you expect gunshots. Then he saw it. A woman being dragged by her hair. She screamed. The man yelled at her, shoved her down. Peter slammed the brakes. No one else was around. Just darkness. Streetlights. One car parked. He had a choice. Drive away or step out. He chose to step out. Peter yelled, "Hey! Leave her alone!" The man, later identified as Uric Kane, turned fast. He raised a gun. Peter didn't run. Didn't flinch. He just said again, "Let her go." Kane aimed. Pulled the trigger. Pop. The bullet slammed into Peter's stomach. He fell backward. Crumpled. Pain flooded his body. His eyes went blurry. The world went silent. Kane walked up, stood over him, and pulled the trigger again. But the gun jammed. Click. 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 Peter didn't move. Kane ran. The woman, terrified, ran to Peter. She tried to stop the bleeding. She screamed for help. People finally came out of buildings. 9/11 was called. Blood soaked Peter's shirt. He faded in and out of consciousness. He whispered, "Did he get away?" Peter was rushed to University Medical Center. He had a shattered intestine. Internal bleeding. He was awake for part of the ride. Kept asking, "Is she okay?" Doctors put him under. His body went into shock. They prepped him for emergency surgery. Kane ran through the streets after the shooting. He didn't ditch the gun. Didn't go far. Police got tips from neighbors who recognized him from the street cam footage. He was arrested just 3 days later, hiding in an apartment less than 5 miles away. Kane was 21. He had a record: armed robbery, assault, carjacking. He was out on $50,000 bond at the time of the shooting. He'd already robbed another couple earlier that week. He should have been in jail. The story hit the news fast. Tulane medical student shot after stopping kidnapping. Hero steps in, pays the price. Surgeon save man who refused to look away. People were furious. Why was Kane out? Why was no one else on the street? Why did Peter have to be alone? Even the New Orleans Police Department spoke out. He saved a life. Risked his own. He's the kind of man this city needs. They called it an act of courage and sacrifice. Peter's parents were flooded with messages. Flowers. Cards. Donations for medical bills. The woman Peter saved was in her 20s. Police didn't release her name. She had known Kane before. Some said it was an abusive relationship. Others said she had tried to leave him. That night, he snapped. Dragged her into the street. Tried to force her into a car. Then Peter came along. Security footage of the attack leaked online. It was blurry, but you could see everything. Peter stepping out. Kane raising the gun. The shot. The jammed weapon. People couldn't believe it. Some said it looked like a movie. But it was real life. Tulane University created a support fund for Peter. Over $70,000 was raised in days. The dean released a statement. We stand by Peter. He embodies the spirit of service we teach here. Students wore shirts that said, "Be like Peter." He's the kind of guy who checks on his neighbors. Bring soup when you're sick. The kind of guy who will stand between danger and someone who can't fight. Kane pled guilty to attempted murder and kidnapping. He was sentenced to 54 years. No parole. No early release. The judge said, "You had a choice. You chose violence. And now you'll live with it." Peter didn't attend the sentencing. He said he didn't need to see Kane ever again. In the US, 1 in 4 men will experience some form of physical violence in their lifetime. CDC, 2022. Peter became one of them. And he barely survived. This is a true story. Every detail is based on verified reports. Peter Gold is real. Uric Kane is real. And the woman saved that night? She's real too. This isn't fiction. This could happen to anyone. Would you have stepped out of the car? Would you have spoken up? Or driven away? There's no shame in being afraid. But stories like Peter's remind us, courage is choosing to act anyway. Peter woke up days later in the hospital. His mom was there. So was his sister. Tears in their eyes. Smiles on their faces. Peter was confused. What happened? You saved someone, his mom whispered. Then he remembered the gun. The pain. The woman. Is she okay? He asked. Peter had gone through 4 surgeries. They removed part of his intestine. He lost nearly half his blood volume. But the bullet had missed his spine, his heart, and his lungs. By inches. The surgeon said. He should have died. But he didn't. He's one of the lucky ones. Peter looked down at his stomach. A long line of stitches. Black thread. It hurt to move. To laugh. To breathe. But he was alive. And the woman? She was safe. The mayor visited Peter in the hospital. So did Tulane faculty, students, and even strangers. People brought flowers, cards, cookies. Some just stood outside the hospital and held signs. One said, "You saw her. You stopped. You saved." News crews set up outside the hospital. Reporters asked questions Peter wasn't ready to answer. One headline read, "Good Samaritan nearly dies for doing the right thing." Another said, "The day a student shamed the city into action." Peter couldn't walk at first. Couldn't eat real food. Every cough felt like fire in his ribs. He needed therapy, both physical and emotional. Some nights he cried. Some nights he felt angry. But most nights, he just felt lucky. Peter gave one interview before leaving the hospital. He said, "I didn't think. I just saw someone in trouble. I'd hope someone would do the same for my sister or my mom." When asked if he regretted stepping in, he paused, then said, "No. Never." Uric Kane sat in jail awaiting sentencing. Prosecutors didn't hold back. They listed his record. They showed the video. They said, "This man didn't just try to kidnap someone. He tried to murder a person trying to help." Kane showed no emotion. No apology. Just silence. Kane was given 54 years in prison without parole. The courtroom was packed. Peter didn't attend. But he released a statement. This isn't about revenge. It's about stopping the cycle. Peter's case wasn't just a crime story. It became a citywide wake-up call. Why was Kane out on bond? Why didn't anyone else help that woman? Why did it take a medical student to stop it? The justice system in New Orleans faced heat. People called for bail reform. New programs were proposed for domestic violence awareness and bystander training. Peter's story became the reason. His best friend said, "Peter doesn't see himself as a hero. He just sees a world where doing nothing isn't an option." Peter's mom told reporters, "He was raised to speak up, even when it's scary. I just never imagined it would almost cost him his life." His sister added, "I'm proud of him. But I'm angry too. Why does it take this much pain to wake people up? Did you know? Most people freeze during emergencies. Not because they're bad people, but because they've never been trained what to do." Source: FBI Crisis Response Manual, 2021. That's why we added a real self-defense course in the description and first pinned comment. It's made by law enforcement and martial arts experts. It teaches how to spot danger, how to speak up, and how to protect yourself or others when no one else will. You don't need a gym. You just need 60 minutes. 1 hour that could save a life. Months later, Peter was back at Tulane. He walked slowly. But he walked. Teachers gave him standing ovations. Students lined the hallway. He said it was a little too much attention. But he smiled. She never spoke publicly. But word got around that she was safe. Had moved out of state. Started therapy. Told a friend. He didn't just save my life. He reminded me I was worth saving. Peter didn't want to be a hero. But he became one anyway. He made people ask harder questions. He made the city look in the mirror. He made us all wonder, would I have done the same? This is not a movie. This happened. Peter Gold is real. He got shot for helping someone who couldn't help herself. Peter started his mornings slower now. A warm cup of tea. Some sunlight through the window. He still had scars. He still had pain. But he also had peace. He told a friend, "I wake up. I breathe. That's a gift." Peter said something one day that stuck with people. He said, "I learned that pain teaches you who you are. I didn't run that night because I knew I couldn't live with myself if I did." He finished medical school. He became a doctor. Not just any doctor, a trauma surgeon. The kind who saves people like himself. When asked why that specialty, he smiled. "Because I know what it's like to lay on that table and wonder if anyone's fighting for you." Peter began speaking at schools, hospitals, and community centers. He talked about courage, about fear, about choice. He said, "Bravery isn't about not being scared. It's about moving anyway." Some people asked, what happened to Kane's family? Turns out, he had a daughter. She grew up knowing her dad shot a stranger. One reporter said she cried watching Peter's speech. She whispered, "That man is who my father should have been." One day, Peter received a letter. No name. No address. Just a handwritten note. It said, "You didn't know me, but you gave me my life back. You gave me a second chance. I promise I won't waste it." Peter folded it, kept it in his wallet. Never told anyone for years. Did you know? In the US, 80% of abuse victims know their attacker. And in most cases, bystanders see it, but do nothing. Source: Bureau of Justice Statistics, 2020. Peter wasn't one of those bystanders. That's why we added a family safety course in the description and first pinned comment. Not to scare you. To prepare you. It teaches how to spot danger. How to help safely. How to act when seconds matter. Because the truth is, you never think it'll happen near you until it does. Years later, when things had calmed down, someone asked Peter, "Do you still think about that night?" He said, "Every day. But not because of the pain. Because it reminded me how one small decision can ripple into something huge." Peter standing outside the hospital. In scrubs. Watching a patient get wheeled out. The same way he was once wheeled in. He nods to the family. They nod back. They don't know his story. But they feel something. They feel safe. This story is real. Peter Gold is real. And that woman could have been anyone. So the next time you see something that doesn't feel right, remember this. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to be present. Have you heard this story before? What would you have done in Peter's shoes? Would you freeze or fight? If you want real stories that could save your life or someone else's, subscribe now to Unbelievable True Story. Because the next case? It starts with a missing backpack and ends with a freezer full of secrets.